Welcome to the Environmental Leadership Chronicles, a podcast brought to you by the California Association of Environmental Professionals. In this episode, I'm joined by co-host Connie Dobreva, and we feature Michael Brandman, who is the president and CEO of Michael Brandman Associates. Michael's a pioneer in the environmental industry. Just a few years into his career in 1974, he was one of the original founders of the Association of Environmental Professionals, and he later served as the California State Board President in 1983. His journey closely aligned with the environmental movement, witnessing the establishment of crucial policies such as CEQA, NEPA, the Endangered Species Act, and the Clean Water Act. In 1982, Michael took a leap and started Michael Brandman Associates, a consulting firm that provided expertise in the environmental compliance at the local, state, and federal level. Over the course of 30 years in business, they successfully completed over 8,000 projects and employed a team of 65 individuals. In 2012, Michael Brandman Associates was acquired by First Carbon Solutions, cementing their impact in the industry. During this conversation, Michael shares his insights on the opportunities AEP provides for leadership training and mentorship, as well as the driving force behind the establishment of AEP's Code of Ethics. While he's retired, Michael remains engaged with AEP, continuing to contribute his wisdom and expertise to the field that he helped shape. It was a true pleasure speaking with Michael, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, I'm Jessa. My pronouns are she, her.
Hi, I'm Connie, and my pronouns are she, her.
So I'm Michael Brandman, and my pronouns would be he, him.
I'm going to introduce Michael.
Yes.
Thank you.
So welcome to our podcast, and we'd like to welcome Michael Brandman of formerly Michael Brandman Associates and one of the leaders of AEP and a legend, I would say, in the environmental community. We were so happy when I looked out into the audience and Lynn Binder said, "Hey, did you see Michael?" I said, "What?" And so it's very exciting to have you here, and thank you for agreeing to come speak with us today.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm really excited about this opportunity, completely unknown, unprepared, but really happy to do this, especially since you're interested a little bit more in my background, what I brought to Association Environmental Professionals over the years, and my business practices and things like that.
Yes, and thank you so much for joining us on the fly. We really appreciate it, and I'm really excited to learn more about you through this conversation. So we start off every podcast asking how you're connected to AEP, and I actually feel a little silly asking you this, but for consistency, how are you connected to AEP?
Been connected a long time. In fact, was one of the original founders of the Association of Environmental Professionals. Attended the Stanford University, actually the formation of the association with some really unique leaders in the early environmental planning practice. It wasn't even known at that time, except we were talking about it and it came together. And a couple of names were Al Reynolds from County of Santa Barbara. I mean, I would say he was really the guru and founder, if you will, brought us all together. And there's I think it was Paul Zigman from ESA was also a prominent leader at that time. So that was back in 1974, and I was just fairly early in the professional practice of environmental planning. Really started my first job in March of 1973. So in 74, I just been around a couple of years, but I would say the key word about my whole career, really my whole life, is synchronicity. And I'll just briefly go over, especially early in my career, going from a really entry level to a principal in less than 2 years.
Oh my gosh! Goodness, congratulations!
Yeah, well, yeah, and it was the synchronicity of what was going on in the very early industry, but also just my passion for the work and creativity, and then really being involved in the early formation of AEP. So that really set me off. But so that was an interesting start, and that just gave me a really quick start into the rest of my career in the 70s and 80s and 90s and so on. But I guess first of all, I went to UCLA, started in '64, graduated with a bachelor's degree in zoology in '68, and I went right into a master's program from there. They just this unique program. Oh, you can get a master's degree in 4 quarters. I said, okay, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went on to get my master's degree in ethology, or animal behavior, and ornithology, and then I decided rather than go off and either teach, or of course there wasn't consulting at that point really, and I wasn't even aware where I was headed. I decided to get a Ph.D. And I studied the great blue heron in Morro Bay, California, which I really enjoyed. It was there from 1970 to 73. And that's where my first employer found me in Morro Bay. I became one of the local experts in ornithology, and I was very involved in the Audubon Society. And there was just like in Lake Tahoe, there was lots of controversial development proposals on Morro Bay, and I just, like a 4,000 slip marina. I mean, give me a break. So I became known as I was a local expert and interviewed by television locally and things like that. But at any rate, a company called Atlantis Scientific interviewed me, wanted to know more about the ecology of Morro Bay and what I was doing there, and pretty much offered me a job on the spot. I said, well, I'm not quite ready. And what do you guys do anyway? What is this environmental impact statement you're doing for the Army Corps of Engineers? Because, the Friends of Mammoth had not really promulgated at that point in time. And so you didn't have EIRs for private projects. You just had, state and federal infrastructure and things like that. So,
and they were in their infancy at that time.
They were very much, and they just fell into, if you will, doing EISs as a side practice to more of their environmental engineering and things that they were doing in the oil industry and some other things with the Corps of Engineers. So it was a brand new professional practice that really people really didn't know anything about, and there was no college curricula at that time. Anywhere. It didn't happen for several years after that. But just the whole environmental movement was coming together with, CEQA being coming into law in the state, and the NEPA, and then the Endangered Species Act, and the Clean Water Act. It's hard to believe this all happened under President Nixon and Ronald Reagan. But it's all it's happening. And then while I was in Morro Bay, there was the what they call Prop 20, which was the Coastal Act that was being sought after at that time, and that passed. And it's just an explosion of an environmental awareness, even before we knew anything about climate changes. Of course, it came a little bit down the road. And so anyway, so I was hired by Atlantis Scientific, and just a sidebar, through my practices and businesses over the years, I went through 5 major recessions, economic recessions, which is really, and I didn't even know what that was at the time. So, and because of that those recessions created opportunity for me. You had to look for the opportunity. A lot of people were, in anguish about it and had a lot of difficulty. But I looked at the opportunity, and with this first job, I was laid off in 5 months. Boom. And that was interesting. And I was in Beverly Hills, West Los Angeles area at the time, and applied for positions, and was 3 firms offered me a job, 2 in Orange County, and I ended up going to Orange County, which I was really unfamiliar with. And so there's a company at that time called Toops Engineering, and they were eventually acquired by Planning Research Corporation. And that's a whole nother story in of itself. But the key to that is, in each step that I went in my career, especially the early ones, I worked with other very prominent either land planners or engineers, civil engineers, or architects who eventually went on to create a number of other consulting firms. I'll touch on that in a second. So at any rate, I decided after 5 months and the recession being going deeper and deeper, that rather than wait potentially for a layoff, because I'd had experienced that once, I decided, you know what, I'm going to look around. So at that time, American Planning Association was called American Society of Planners. And so they had job opportunities listing, and applied for a couple of things there. But I actually accepted a position in upstate New York to be the Director of Natural Resources Planning of the Lake Ontario St. Lawrence River system. Now, got to remember, I just was basically entry level earlier that year in 73. So by the end of the year, I was being offered this position, which I actually accepted to go to upstate New York and live in Watertown. And I was contacted by a name you might be familiar with, Dick Ramella.
Yes. One of the founders
of the Planning Center. Well, Dick was with Chapman Phillips Brandt Reddick. And he had just come from Orange County, environmental management practice there, that they just created it at the Orange County planning. Anyway, so he became aware of me from one of the first major land development EIRs that I actually was preparing as a project manager at Tubes. And I met Bill Phillips. Some of you might remember Bill Phillips, and John Chapman, who was one of the founders of the Planning Center. So the Planning Center, that's just as an example of some of these people I worked with that went on to create these other organizations that just grew and thrived, and Planning Center still exists today under a different name.
PlaceWorks.
What is it?
PlaceWorks.
Okay, right. So anyway, so they offered me a job, and I took that job. I declined the other one. I stayed in Orange County, sunny Orange County, rather than moving to very cold Watertown, New York. And I had my own stipulations as Director of Natural Resources Planning for CEP, for Chapman Phillips Brandt Reddick, which was a land planning firm. Did a little bit of architecture under John, who was an architect, but they were doing major land planning projects, and they needed to have someone that could prepare EIRs relating to the different planning projects. So that was me. Took that position, grew that position, and as a director, so in less than a year, went from entry level to director. And then John and Bill, who were the primary owners of CPBR, decided, but we want to go down different paths, and so they decided to talk to different employees, and Dick and John went this way, and Bill Phillips and some others went that way, and I had to make a decision. I could have gone either way.
Mm-hmm.
They both wanted me because for that environmental practice. That by that time I built about 6 people in a year, and was doing quite well. And I decided to stay with Bill and become a principal and owner, because that wasn't actually offered to me by the other group, because they're much, I was just this young guy in his late 20s who barely scratched the surface. So went that direction with Bill Phillips and some others, and John and Dick went to Planning Center with some others, and that's, the rest is history there. So I'm going to take a drink of water.
Yeah. No, I think I'm just listening, like literally almost, well, not almost, okay.
Yeah.
Not literally on the edge of my seat, but I feel like I am. And it's so incredible to hear all these opportunities and the early onset of this field and industry, and something that when we were talking about, like a lot of these fields and careers didn't exist at the time. And I was wondering, like, what in the first place, like, even led you to this interest, like, in the passion for the environment?
Well, I think the passion for the environment came through my Ph.D. program and being in Morro Bay, because I was studying this particular bird, great blue heron. Mm-hmm. But to do that and the type of work I was doing, I had to understand the entire environment, what was going on, and the ecology in Morro Bay. in terms of the hydrology, the geology, the climate, the interaction with other species, land development, what was affecting the wildlife, et cetera, et cetera. So that really gave me a perspective of that. And then actually my first title was wildlife biologist, not environmental planner.
Yeah.
As you know, and I had not I completed my Ph.D. Field work, but I had not physically had my Ph.D. and written my thesis at that point. I actually wrote that over the next couple of years. So that really introduced me to it. And then I think just in my first job, it was amazing. I was thrust in the position of project manager on this major project for the Corps of Engineers in Florida on the Kissimmee River, which actually is there. I think National Geographic just had a major story on that in the magazine and so on. But the Kissimmee River basically was channelized and created total environmental ecological havoc from the 60s and almost up until the present. And so the study was to say, okay, how do we correct this problem? How do we put it back? So again, it gave me this holistic view of the total environment dealing with this one issue of the Kissimmee River. And so I became rather specialized in water resource related projects, even though that wasn't my trained background in college and otherwise. So I did many, many, many other projects after that relating to water resources and water management and water quality and this, that, and the other thing. So that I think gave me the bigger perspective. And then from going to TUPS, which is a civil engineering firm that had a planning and small environmental practice, they were dealing with land development. So that really put me in a position to understand that aspect of what was going on with the effects of land development on the ecology, on the environment. And so I entered that with the perspective of balance. Balance is another key word, balancing the environmental quality and the state of the environment at the time of a proposed land development and actually analyzing, okay, what would the impacts be? What are the mitigation measures, or even a redesign and alternatives of balancing that land development? Because my theory was the population is growing, land development is going to happen, infrastructure is going to happen. So I felt good about myself and my practice to help balance that. All those different projects with the environment. Yes, were there going to be impacts? Yes, there were. But how can we reduce those? And I really, early on, long before became a buzzword, and mitigation measures and mitigation monitoring programs, that's something that I developed, really in the late 70s and early 80s, and eventually it became part of the CEQA guidelines and CEQA practice, as many other things. And there were times when I actually had to let go of a couple of clients, saying, look, this is not an ethical ethical and moral thing you want me to do, and what you want me to say, and it's not going to happen. So if this is what you want to promote, then you're going to have to hire somebody else. So those weren't pleasant conversations.
Integrity and staying true to your
Absolutely.
values. That's
absolutely, and that's built in the ethics of AEP and ethical practices, and it wasn't always followed by some people, but that's just something that really based my environmental practice and instilled in my employees and how I mentored my employees. You can say no to something that a particular, whether it's a public or private client. So that's a little bit of a diversion.
Yeah,
a little bit. It is, and yet you bring up a really interesting point, which is maybe your theory on mentorship And in telling us your story, what I heard often was that AEP and APA professional organizations played a large part in how you were introduced to people, how you got your jobs, and how you then grew your firm over the years and the relationship you had. Could you maybe speak to the leaders, today's leaders that maybe don't see the importance of associations, or could you speak to how important it was for you in your business and your mentorship of people to be involved with professional organizations?
Yes, definitely. And just to reemphasize that part of the instigation, if you will, for creating an association of environmental professionals was the code of ethics, because there was a lot of negative things going on, even in the early 70s, that the professionals that were there paid attention to and said, that we have to have a code of ethics that our association members subscribe to in terms of how the need to be objective and to be ethical and so on and so on. And so that's a big part of it. But that was also part of my own, again, my own personal development. And I took my own personal development and transferred that into a mentorship of people that I brought on. So as part of that mentorship was, yes, you need to have an ethical practice. You need to have a continuing education. It's just like it's not a one and done type of situation where you get your degree. You need to continue, because in this evolving field, which was evolving extremely quickly in the first couple of decades, in particular. I mean, it still is. It's never going to stop. You need to stay abreast of the issues. You need to stay abreast of the regulations. And a big part of that is being involved in the Association of Environmental Professionals, and because it brings so much opportunity for training, for mentorship, for leadership. And so I really promoted that with my employees. In fact, many of people that work for me became directors, became officers in AEP over the decades. And I mentored people early on when I became PB at Phillips Brandt Reddick, when John Chapman started the planning system, because Phillips Brandt Reddick. So I went from a practice of 3 or 4 people up to about 25 people in the environmental aspect of that, and the firm grew. And then in early 82, in 82, another deep recession was going on, and the way the company was set up is that Bill Phillips was the primary owner, and he had his own way of doing business and kind of blending his personal life with business life, and that's just something that didn't fit well with me, and so I decided I wanted to start my own company.
And this was what year?
In 1982, the end of 82. And so I had you were talking about your organization, so I started an instant firm of 8 people, literally overnight. From leaving PPR and setting up an office and so on and so on. And one of my early employees, and I pride as a great success, that I brought on in 1983 when we're still very, very young and growing, was Gary Jacobs, who's now, I don't know if his title is president or CEO, but obviously he's a leader in a sense, along with Curtis Alley. And so Gary and I worked together for almost a couple of decades, and a little less time with Kurt. But I was really, really proud of my mentorship with Gary, who was at that time very young, pretty much entry level, and by the time he did leave MBA, he was a principal in the company in a short time. So I kind of patterned my development, my professional development in the company, and education and so on, and tried to pass that along to my employees. And the ones that took that on, it became very, very successful in what they do. And some of them are still doing it today, which is nice. And it's good seeing Gary here at the conference.
Absolutely. I love the origin stories. And I really love your mantra or sort of your thoughts on allowing people to promote quickly. You were able to promote yourself. And so rather than, and yes, experience is important, but I love the entrepreneurial spirit that you seem to have just carried throughout all of your endeavors.
Yeah.
And how large did Michael Brandman Associates become by the time you stepped away?
Well, one
From
time,
the 8 to
from the 8, it went up to in the 80s. It was a very short recession, although very deep. But then, and people thought I was crazy. What are you doing? You're setting up a new firm when there's no business out there? Well, there actually was business, and actually, I had developed quite good relationships both in the public, private sector, and not just myself, but my team. And so we grew very quickly. We literally doubled every year from 1983 up until the end of the into the 80s. So 8, 16, and was almost literally exponential in that way. So we ultimately were about 150 people, 5 offices. We developed some other disciplines dealing with toxics and the regulations leading to where I'm trying to remember the name of the report you had to do, but all of a sudden it was regulated where you had to, for a property transaction.
the phase one.
Environmental. Thank you. Yeah. So we developed a practice in that, and that led us into hiring some people that were doing environmental work in landfills and landfill design. And so that was really, really interesting part of the practice, and many other things in water resources. And so it was very diverse. And we talk about inclusion and diversity today, and we didn't really talk about it in that way back in the 80s, but although I promoted it. In fact, our firm was always more than 50% women. And early on, we didn't necessarily focus on other ethnicities, but I mean, everybody was welcome. It didn't really matter. What did matter, you had people, the demographics were the people that were coming out of the colleges and how the field was developing to environmental planning degrees and so on, and who were taking those degrees. So in Orange County, the demographics were different than they were in Los Angeles or other places. And so I promoted that and promoted flexibility for the women, because women were really the driving force in our company. We had women that promoted up to becoming principals in the firm, and so on and so on. And when women are married and they want to have a family, we gave opportunity for them to work at home. Early on, initially, of course, they took the time off. Even before it was regulated, we gave time off with pay, and then allowed kind of a ramping back up to whatever worked for them in their own family relationships and with their professional development. So that we actually had women come to my firm because of that.
That's great.
Including my present wife. Back in she was married, she was married to someone else at that time, and I was too, and there was no relationship. But the fact is, part of the reason she was attracted to Michael Brandman Associates, because she wanted to have a family. She wasn't pregnant. She wanted to have a family. She wanted to have the flexibility, and she knew that that's what we did. So that was something we promoted.
Great model.
Yeah.
How important was culture to the organization? A lot of times organizations will focus a lot on the vision and profits and goals. And how important what role did culture play in your firm? It sounds like by reputation, quite a bit.
Well, definitely. And, I would say some might disagree, and maybe it went up and down a little bit, but having a feeling of family culture within the company was very, very important. And especially early on when we weren't really, really big, over 100 people. But as we were developing, especially in the 80s, maybe early 90s, is that we would have annual company picnics and with softball game or volleyball games with the families and this. So we were not only worked together, but we had families that came together, and so we definitely had that culture, and we had the culture of really, to the best of our ability, make sure that our employees took advantage of every opportunity for their own personal growth, not only professionally but otherwise, if that's what they needed. And so I think we were one of the first firms, certainly in environmental practice, that had a human resources team and a human resources director, and that was important to us. And I think our team really supported that, and we supported people in their own growth opportunities long term in retirement, whether it's 401k. And we actually had a 401k plan in 1984. We were just 2 years into practice. And so that was something that was important to, not just for the owners. And there were 5 owners. We started out, we had 8 employees, but 5 owners, and I was a majority owner. And then they all continued to develop from there, and we brought in new people that were able to participate in ownership. So that was really, really very important for people to know that they could grow within the firm. They didn't have to go to another firm to climb that ladder, if you will, and to really share with our employees. And we had, I think, pretty progressive bonus programs and time off programs and so on and so on. Yeah. So
I think listening to that, it's very forward thinking and long-term thinking to implement all those initiatives that you spoke of and benefits when it wasn't required at the time, and I think about how you said your work, Memorial Bay, when you saw all the systems work together and you could see the big picture. It's like applying that to the business model itself as well. Like you could see, if we treat people better, we're going to have an easier time recruiting. They're going to want to stay. They're going to be more engaged and better performing. And that helps grow. And like you said, exponentially, double growth year after year after year is clearly a result of how well you treated your people.
Definitely. And I learned early on at PBR that the primarily architectural, design, and engineering firms were obviously well ahead of the environmental profession in terms of their business practices and acumen and project management practices and so on and so on. So I took my time and spent my time to take the courses and be involved in learning more about project management and business management and leadership and so on. And I was really the one in that firm, even though the other 3 principals at first were landscape architects. They really didn't have much interest in that. They had other interests, but I really had an interest. And so I brought that into my firm, and I also wanted the environmental professional to be not a second-class citizen with projects, because almost really the first couple of decades, and it doesn't exist now, I'm sure, but we were called, the EIR guys. We were basically secondary or second-class citizens, if you will, on being a team member on a project, and I promoted bringing bringing our profession up to where we were equals. It's almost, when we think about inclusion and other things, well, the environmental practice itself was discriminated against in a lot of ways. And I think I really helped bring our profession to be equals with the architects and the planners and the designers, where we sat at the table designing projects, because that's what I did. I was right there. In fact, there were several projects where I was actually the overall principal in charge of a design project. And the environmental aspect of it really became the driver more than anything else. And I really believed in the design with nature, Ian McCark, and that I was exposed to that early in my career. And that's another one thing back in 1974. And so I subscribed to that and used that in my practices right then. And it was great being part of design teams early on at PBR, CPBR. When I became that director of natural resources, all of a sudden, I had some importance. So that was an important part of it.
This is a little bit of I don't know if it's a digression, but for those who are listening and maybe watching, might be able to see him kind of laughing at because they see Michael's badge and it has 2 AEP 20 plus members on it. And I'm like, okay, because it's been 50 years technically, so they didn't make a badge for you. That was not very inclusive, but I see you got 2.
Yeah, that was kind of cute. When I was registering and I saw the tag, 20 plus members, I said, well, I've been a member for longer than
yeah.
She said, well, then take 2.
That's fine. I love that. You cut another one in half for the 50 years.
Yeah.
I was thinking of, you're retired now and you're at the AEP conference. And so I was wondering, what's it like today? What's your involvement with AEP and the profession?
It hasn't been much.
I should say, how are you? Staying involved, maybe.
Yeah, I sold my company in 2012. Actually, I had several suitors that were interested in acquiring our company because, again, we were just coming out of the big 2008 to 2011 recession, and we made it through that, and we're growing and profitable, and so we were potentially an attractive acquisition. And I was getting towards close into my full-time professional career, at least it seemed that way, so we had several suitors, so I sold the firm to a company, First Carbon Solutions, which is part of a larger, major worldwide conglomerate called ADEC that was stationed out of the Philippines. They did huge amount of data management for companies like First American Title. First American Title basically sent everything overseas. And as far as their data and their records and everything having to do with property transactions. And they also did major work for pharma around the world. Anyway, they had a smaller environmental practice called First Carbon Solutions, which is really focusing on sustainability and how can we reduce the carbon footprint and so on. Very, very early on in this, if you will, sustainability type of practice. So they thought that our environmental planning firm teamed with theirs could really develop into something. So anyways, it was an opportunity. I probably would have definitely worked professionally longer than I did. But at that point in time, it just didn't make sense. And my son, Jason Brandman is principal and executive vice president at First Carbon Solutions. And so he continued the environmental practice. So it's the Michael Brandman Associates
lives on.
Yeah, it lives. That's a good way to put it. Lives on with Jason and his practice and what he's doing. And so that's exciting. And so that's still happening. So go ahead.
Cut you off. We have had a series on the podcast, an intergenerational series with leaders like you and your son. I think could be I'm going to float that idea out.
That would be fun. Yeah. Oh, no, he's fun.
I want to float that idea out. We had Corinne and her mother on one of those. So
he will bring a different perspective. No question. And, one of the things I didn't mention, you can just kind of tell about my story and who I am and what I've done is my passion.
Yeah.
My passion for the practice. And so, I came to work, quote unquote, every day with excitement and joy and ready for the next challenge. And believe me, there were a lot of different challenges, not only project challenges, but economic challenges and employee challenges and this, that, and the other thing over the decades. But I always was excited about that. I knew challenges presented opportunities, and they did. You may not have thought that they might at the time. He certainly didn't. Yeah. But in the end, some of the challenges created opportunities for him specifically to make I'll call it a quantum leap, much like I did earlier in my career, from from being, at one level in the firm to another level in the firm.
Yeah.
And to what he is today and what he's accomplishing. So that would be an interesting conversation.
Planting that seed. All right. Speaking it to existence. So anyway.
That's okay.
For the digression, but
so let me see. I think I've talked about the progression from the different companies. And I think one of the things I'm very proud of, and some of the people I might not even remember their names, but I would say over the decades, from the direct mentoring that I did, and from the mentoring, again, Gary Jacobs is another example that he's done. I mean, we've literally touched hundreds of environmental professionals. And, that's a really good feeling to have. And so when I saw that the conference was coming to Lake Tahoe, I said, oh, I really need to take advantages. I really would like to re-engage in the organization. And there may be opportunities through some sort of leadership emeritus things I think Michael Hendricks is thinking about. He hasn't really talked to me in detail, but anyway, that kind of excites me. And I know next year is the 50-year anniversary. And
shameless plug, it will be in Anaheim.
There will be in Anaheim, where I came from when I'm from up here from Lake Tahoe. We lived in Anaheim and did many projects in the city of Anaheim, from the Disney projects, California Adventures, and the specific plan, and Anaheim Stadium expansion for the Rams. Everybody can remember the Rams at that time, and so on and so on. So I have a good relationship and history with the city of Anaheim and of course Orange County, which really gave me the biggest boost in my career. A lot of interesting things, and I did offer my library today to Lynn, because I've selectively kept the really key documents during my career, going back from the 70s up through 2012, let's say.
Wow.
And I want to offer those to the organization to have. And, I've kept them in, really good condition and so on, but I really don't need to keep them stored in a closet, if you will, anymore. I'd like the organization to have them and for posterity. So you see a good progression of environmental planning documents going back to the mid 70s, up until at least that point in time. And I know they've developed even further since then. Yeah. So that's something that will happen soon. Yeah,
that's incredible. That's what you continue to give and share, and so many generations. Like you said, you've touched hundreds of professionals and haven't stopped. Like you're continuing to share your knowledge and leadership and expertise and create these resources or provide these resources for career professionals to access. And I think that's really important. I love that you're giving that to AEP. That's what a gift. Oh, I feel like I know Connie has a plug.
Oh yes, no. So we are kicking off a mentorship program in the next week or two, and we absolutely would love to have you on board if you'd be interested. Mm-hmm. We're also creating an emeritus program to make sure that you continue to have involvement and learn from, as folks have retired and are getting to retirement age, the sharing of knowledge of history, your leadership skills, the things that are important for young planners to learn. We definitely don't want to lose this legacy of yours. And so that's one of the things we discussed at yesterday's board meeting was how can we capture that? How can we create opportunities to involve you with the emerging professionals and to have them learn from you? I wrote down some words of sort of your story and synchronicity, balance, integrity, passion, sort of the code of ethics of your own life, and also making sure that that is embodied in the profession and how those two things are really intertwined. And then more than anything, how challenges present opportunities. And from an early age, I can see that you were fearless in, accepting a role of directorship in New York. And I think that those are such great skills and great outlooks that we'd love to have you share further with the organization.
No, thank you. I'd be happy to do it. It's pretty exciting time. And it's so exciting to see all these young professionals here at this conference.
They're amazing.
They are. Oh my word! And sitting in some of these panels, they are amazing. And if I can add anything to their continued growth, yeah, I'd enjoy doing that. I know Michael Hendricks would like to, and I know Gary will. I mean, Gary is kind of the second generation, and he's developed the third generation, maybe even the fourth from that after all these years, and it's just expanding from there.
Absolutely, they continue to be leaders in our industry.
Yeah.
They create content. They bring their companies. They pour so much of themselves into this organization. We have the Al Reynolds Award. So everybody that you started out with are just, we're still heavily contributing to this organization and this practice that we have.
Yes.
Yeah. I can see. I mean, what the size and diversity of the organization and the stability and the economics stability at this point in time is just going to grow exponentially. I mean, it's just well established. And I was president back in 82, 83, and we were struggling. It was a tough time. It was in a recession, and we lost money in that conference that I was actually the president of, and I didn't feel great about that. But I spent the next few years again trying to help remedy that and grow the association. But it's come so far, and I'm really pleased to see that. It's fantastic.
Well, what's the membership now?
Well, our membership is about 22 or 2,300 folks. And for those of you that don't know, we're actually recording live here at the conference, and we have about 650 attendees, which is record setting for us.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, it's really great.
And we really couldn't have done it. We can't do it without, we're all volunteers, so we can't do it without the continued dedication and passion of basically the people that you mentored and the example that you and everybody who was at the foundation of AEP, your legacy still lives on. I guess maybe I just want to acknowledge and thank that, because just Gary still helps prepare all of our case updates every single year. So
it's fantastic.
This still is an ongoing gift that you all started when you helped found AEP at sort of the birth of environmental planning in California and in the United States.
Yeah.
And being back here at Lake Tahoe, not just being at this conference, but seeing the challenges and the issues and everything going on here. Actually, my wife Pam and I were actually getting more involved in some of the meetings and workshop and what's going on, dealing with housing and transportation and in the environment and water quality, and so on and so on. So we're here, and that's the other thing excited about coming to this conference, is that this just gives an opportunity to meet some of the other people, such as the supervisor and Julie and so on. Knew of them, of course, and read about them a lot, but now it gives an opportunity to actually engage more directly to improve and continuing what's going on here.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the fly. Connie tracked you down and roped you in here. And we're so glad you stayed to record this with us. Thank you. And we'll do our wrap up rapid five and let you go check out the first session. So what is your favorite daily habit?
Oh boy. Well, I mean, habits and routines are one thing. Well, one thing that relates to that that I have to say is that after I finished up with MBA and First Carbon, about a year later, actually, it may have been the first AEP Institute I went to in Berkeley, I think it was, in 2015. And I decided at that time, and I got kind of reacquainted with people, and I said, I think I need to move on to my next chapter. So very soon after that, I enrolled in a master's program of consciousness studies with the Holmes Institute. So I have another master's degree, but it's in an entirely different program. Although there's a lot of overlap with what I've done in my career and how I brought that to my consciousness studies. And so I also a couple of years later, studied to become a spiritual practitioner with the Centers for Spiritual Living. So that's what I'm doing as a practice. It's not full time, but and my wife Pam became a minister, and so that's what brought us back up here with in the Centers of Spiritual Living in Carnelian Bay. So part of my routine, which I really do love, is supporting her, and so I take care of the business, the routine business at home.
Okay, I love it.
And so she can get out the door because she works full time at what she does, more than full time actually. So I enjoy helping her, preparing her, and then I'm involved in the center in other ways and with the members. So that's very exciting.
Oh man, I've won a whole other podcast on that.
That's a whole different, that's a whole other podcast.
And I appreciate you saying that because. And when we interviewed Julie Reagan, and she was saying how instrumental, like her husband has been at home to helping her and do some of the business, the home business, so she can get her Ph.D. and be the executive director. So
same thing.
I love it. It's supportive men. Yes.
Of course, they do fit in real quickly. I do fit in my skiing and my cycling and my hiking, and kayaking and all that stuff.
You can have some fun too. Okay.
I do.
I love that. It's so interesting. All right. 3 things you take to a deserted island.
I heard that. First, top of my head, binoculars. Because, I not only look for birds, but other wildlife. So I'm a real, observer what's going on around me. So binoculars. The second, so for desert, I said the other thing I would want is a kayak. Yeah, right. And I would. It's really funny, yes. I mean, I would want my snorkel gear.
Yes.
So those are 3 things I have to have.
I love that. Very practical. And fun too.
And fun, yeah.
What's your favorite environmental policy?
Well, I think because I was part of the development of it and I really believed in it, and it's taken decades, probably not perfect yet, but maybe close, is mitigation monitoring. It was so abused in the early years, or non-existent, even though people were supposed to do it. And it was at those times where your client, again, you were kind of who are you? You're just the environmental consultant. What do you know? You can't tell us what to do. Well, I think that is for the whole balance aspect of it, and a continuing balance of whatever impacts a project might have had on the environment, and you have mitigation measures set up, is to follow through on those for whatever length of time you're supposed to be doing that to create, again, a better quality environment. So that would be it.
What's your favorite flora or fauna?
Oh, well, I have to say the great blue heron.
2 speakers in a row.
Did you hear Julie say that?
She said that was her favorite bird.
Great blue heron?
Yes.
I did not.
So when you said it, Connie and I just kind of were like, wow, earlier in the conversation, we're like, oh, the great blue heron. And I was like, I bet that's going to be his favorite.
Yeah. Well, I spent 3 years with this bird and this colony in Morro Bay, and 24/7. I mean, it was really quite incredible learning about the behavior of this particular species. It was called, and my title of my thesis was the analysis. Let's see, I correct. It was about the quantitative analysis of behavior in the great blue heron. So what is that all about? And what that took was really following this bird around and seeing exactly how it behaved, how it performed, how it adapted. I've never seen an organism that was so adaptive to the changing environment. So anyway, great blue heron, they're a beautiful bird, very, very unique. Yeah.
Well, you and Julie connected.
I'll have to talk to her. That's really
yeah,
interesting.
I'd love to read that report.
Yeah.
So when
Right.
you meet about Lake Tahoe and some of the work she's doing, you could talk about the Great Blue Heron.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I'll hear it in her podcast when we listen. If she listened to this one, she'll hear it.
Yeah. And then finish this thought. Wouldn't it be cool if?
Wouldn't it be cool if? Wouldn't it be cool for me, not me, or anything?
Anything.
Oh, anything.
You, the world, me.
Finishing thoughts.
Okay. Well, I'll just stick to since we're in Lake Tahoe and the Locum Bay, wouldn't it be cool that between the agencies and the people in the community, that we'll be able to actually have real balance in the environmental quality of the place that we live for ourselves and for the surrounding environment? That would be cool.
It would be awesome.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, Michael.
Okay, you're welcome.
Michael, thank you so much. We're honored. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to be updated when new episodes are released and leave us a review to let us know what you think. It also really helps us to share the podcast with others who may enjoy learning about the environmental industry. If you want to submit a shout out or any feedback, please send an email or voice memo to podcast@califaep.org. The email again is podcast with an S, podcast@califaep.org.